explore one of the other electoral system? Well then, let's go.
In addition to plurality, maturity, proportional representation, and mixed system, a final and unique example of electoral system which do not fall neatly into any particular category design is the Bordacount.
With our objectives today, first is to discuss and define Bordacount. Second, to identify the advantages and disadvantages of Bordacount. And lastly, to discuss the case study in Nauru and their modified Bordacount. So, a lot of us is wondering why this electoral system is named as Bordacount. For the reason that it is named after John Charles de Borda, a French mathematician, a scientist, and a naval engineer who developed the system in 1770.
What is Bordacount? Bordacount is a candidate-centered preferential system used in either a single or multi-member districts in which voters use numbers to mark their preferences on the ballot paper, and each preference mark is then assigned a value using equal steps. These are summed and the candidates with the highest total is or are declared elected.
With that definition, it means that in every preference that you mark in your ballot paper, it has an equivalent points. So the question now is how could you be able to know how many points is equivalent to every preferences? So it always differ to the number of candidates running for any position. So if there are 10 candidates, then 10 would be the points to your given to your first preference, then 9 points to your second one, then 8 points to your third one, then 7 points to the fourth one, and 6 points to the fifth one, and so on. Okay, so if there are 5 candidates, then your first preference would have 5 points, the second one would have 4 points, and so on. Okay, it always differ to the number of the candidates.
To further elaborate my discussion earlier, take a look at this example. So here we have 4 candidates. With that, so the first choice or the first preference are given 4 points. The second preference would have 3 points. The third preference would have 2 points, and the last or the fourth preference would have 1 point. As you can see, there are 51, 25, 14, 10. So maybe you're wondering what are these numbers are indicated for. So these are the numbers of the voters. So why they are divided into 4 categories? So we're divided into 4. So because for the reasons that there are 51 voters who rank the candidate in the same way, with the same sequence. So there are 51 voters who voted A, B, C, and D in the same manner. And we have 25 voters voted B as the first choice, then C, D, and A. And also we have 14 voters who voted C as their first choice, and as well as we have 10 voters who elected as D as their first choice. So okay, I hope you get that. The question now is how to tabulate and to be able to identify the winner of the election. So take a look at this example. So take a look at candidate A. So for 51 voters, there are 51 voters rather who rank him as the first choice. And as the first preference of the first choice, he has given 4 points. So you have to do is just multiply the number of voters and the points given to that candidate based on his rank. So there are 51 voters for candidate A to rank him as first choice, so with 4 points, so 51 times 4. Then as for 25 voters, they rank the candidate A as the last choice, or the fourth choice. So it has only 1 point, so 25 times 1. And also for 14 voters, they also rank a candidate A as the last preference or the fourth choice with 1 point. So 14 times 1. Then for 10 voters, they also rank A as their last preference or their last choice with 1 point. So 10 times 1. You have to multiply it, then add all the points, then we will get 253 points for candidate A. As for candidate B, for 51 voters, they rank him as the second choice, so with 3 points. So 51 times 3. As for 25 voters, they rank B as their first choice. So 25 times 4. The first choice is equivalent to 4 points. As for 14 voters, they rank candidate B as their second choice with 3 points. So 14 times 3. And for the 10 voters, they rank candidate B as also their second choice, which has 3 points. So 10 times 3. So what we're gonna do is multiply it again, so then add all the numbers gathered or the points gathered by candidate B, then we can have all the points, 325 points all in all for candidate B. So it's the same process for candidate C and candidate D. So for candidate C, we have 51 voters who rank him as the last choice or the last preference with 1 point. So 51 times 1. So 25 voters, they rank him as the second choice. So 25 times 3. Then for 14 voters, they rank candidate C as their first choice. So 14 times 4. And for 10 voters, they rank candidate C as their third choice with 2 points. So 10 times 4. So all in all, candidate B garner 194 points. So with the same in the process with letter D. Okay, so as for the winner, the candidates who gain the biggest points would be the winner. As for this, candidate B wins.
Moving forward on identifying the advantages and disadvantages of Bordacount. So first off, the advantages of Bordacount. We have voters could be able to express a detailed set of preferences. And second one, the modified Bordacount thus encourages everyone to express not only their favorite option, but also those options on which they are prepared to compromise. And as for the disadvantages of Bordacount, first, this kind of electoral system requires some level of numeracy to work, and it may be hard for the voters to fully understand. Second one, Bordacount is susceptible to strategic voting. And the last one, Bordacount violates the majority criterion.
As I said earlier, one of the disadvantages of the Bordacount is that this system violates the majority criteria. So take a look at this example. So there are all in all 100 voters, and 60 of them voted candidate A as the first choice, which has 4 points. And 40 of them rank him as the last choice or fourth choice, which has 1 point. So for majority, so there's a big possibility for candidate A to win. However, using Bordacount, as it was tabulated, as you can see, candidate B wins the election, even though he or she is not voted by the majority. So that is how a Bordacount, Bordacount violates the majority criteria. It also related to one of the disadvantages of this electoral system. As the system is prone or susceptible to strategic voting.
It works like this. You want to vote for candidate A. They're your first choice. But unfortunately, candidate A has little chance of winning. Your second choice is candidate B. They're doing better in the polls. And you really dislike candidate C. So in order to make sure they don't win, you decide to vote for candidate B even though it's not your first pick.
So with all the critics of this electoral system, so one of the most famous one is that this electoral system is susceptible or prone to strategic voting. So with that, John Charles de Borda stated that his system is only intended for honest men.
Now, let's take a look on how Bordacount works
The country
in Nauru.
is the smallest country in Oceania and only about 8.1 square miles. The entire perimeter of the country is only about 12 miles or 19 kilometers long. Due to popular concerns about a German presence in the Pacific, Nauru was captured by Australian forces during the World War I in 1914. The island was placed under United Nations trusteeship with Australia, named as the administering power. In 1951, Nauru's first elections to a local government council were held. On the 31st of January in 1968, Nauru became an independent state, thus becoming one of the first Pacific Island states to gain independence. In September 1999, it became a full member of the United Nations and the Commonwealth of Nations. The country is divided into 14 administrative districts. The Parliament of Nauru is the sole elected national institution. It is a unicameral assembly comprising 19 members elected for a 3-year term from 8 multi-member electoral districts. The districts cover the homes of the 12 traditional tribal clans, although the population of these are now scattered throughout the island. The Parliament itself elects a president who serves as both head of the government and head of the state. Nauru's formal electoral provisions appear to date from 1965, when an electoral ordinance based on Australian law of the time came into effect. This was transformed into a National Electoral Act following the Assumptions of Independence in 1968. Under this act, which is also based largely in the corresponding Australian legislation, Nauru's inherited a preferential electoral system, the alternative vote. Much of the Nauruan electoral law replicates Australian practice, such as voting is compulsory, for example. However, in 1971, Nauru changed its electoral procedures to effectively reinvent a new form of the Bordacount, the Dowdall method. This method has been widely described as a modified form of the Bordacount, but has distinctive properties, and in practice on Nauru, it generates different outcomes to the Bordacount.
In a Dowdall system election unique to only Nauru, voters rank the candidates, and based on how high a candidate is ranked, they get more points. This is done by dividing everyone's ranked position by 1. So in a 4-way race like this example, first place gets 1 point because 1 divided by the rank, 1, is 1. Second place gets 1 divided by 2 votes, or 0.5. Third place gets 1 divided by 3, and on and on and on.
One key difference between the Bordacount and the Dowdall method is that for Borda, the scores allotted to each candidate vary with the number of candidates. For example, there are 3 candidates, so 3 points will be given to the first choice. Whereas with the Dowdall method, a first preference or the first choice is always worth 1, a second preference, half, a third preference, 1/3, and so on. Since 1971, the now-run version of the Bordacount has been used, apparently without difficulty, for some 12 national elections.
Nor is it solely capable of overcoming. In the face of such a problem, it may be tempting to revert to a more authoritarian or less democratic means of government and society. It would seem it's plausible for some charismatic leader to convince the populace to trust in them wholly, to promise to fix the problem, but only if they were given total control, or even whether a few of its people decide to take control without consent. But instead, Nauruans chose a different path. Nauru chose not only democracy, but a democracy which requires participation. On an island of less than 12,000 people, on an island where 10 distinct tribes live physically and 12 distinct tribes live spiritually, personal and tribal divisions did not lead to supremacy of one over the other, but instead cooperation. Nauru is in practice what the global community strives for in theory, living peacefully amongst each other while celebrating and respecting differences, and understanding that whether it is the Pacific Ocean or the universe we inhabit, we live on just one small island. And in order to survive the waves lapping out our shores, Nauruans decided again, and they decide again, every 3 years, the continued commitment that their ship will go farther with a crew whose voices are heard, where no one captain will plot the future course, at least no more than the future they grant them. Nauru will not plot its future alone, but they will plot it together. They will vote on it together.